Okay, Gura Magov, Yasmin, Amy, agus Paul, Rishon our Dory, our Fad. So if you thought that I had already introduced Nadya, these are all wrong. She's done quite a lot. I've had to bottle this down as much as possible. So Nadya Tannous first visited Derry last September as part of the Bloody Sunday Trust Derry Peace and Conflict International Conference, along with other Palestinian representatives, Native American and Black activists. And she clearly made a deep and lasting impression on us, so much so that we have asked her back, and we're delighted that she accepted. At this moment in the history and evolution of humankind, there is no greater cause than that of the Palestinian people. Freedom, justice and peace have never meant as much as they do after witnessing the destruction of Gaza, the current destruction of the West Bank, and the slaughter of thousands of innocent people at the hands of the Israeli army. When our hearts are broken, watching the genocide on our screens, and often feel totally helpless, we are proud and steadfast in our belief that Palestine should be the central focus of our commemoration this year and probably for many years to come. While our hearts are broken, our minds are working to ensure that Derry plays a central role in the worldwide campaign to isolate Israel economically, culturally, politically and academically. Our local council has now taken the formal and public stance by recommitting itself as an apartheid-free zone, where those who support the crimes of genocide and apartheid in Palestine or who aid and abet those crimes in any way will never be welcome and will find little respite here. Birds that struggle for justice and freedom will always find a nest in Derry. Nadya is a Deputy Director at Honour the Earth and a long-time organiser of the Palestinian Youth Movement, and is a community organiser born and raised in the Bay Area with a focus on political education, movement and relation building, anti-militarism, and returning land to the people and the people returning to the land. Nadya holds an MSc in Refugee and Forced Migration Studies from the University of Oxford and is a BA in Anthropology. The Palestinian Youth Movement aims to challenge colonialism, racism and injustice globally through a joint struggle approach while growing and developing the Third World Solidarity allies to maintain and build relationships tying the Palestinian struggle for liberation among all Indigenous peoples. So current Sheikh Ahas and Rakri la Nadya Akor Harbraj. So I give you Nadya Tannous.
I'm quite tall, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Is this fine?
Yeah.
سلام، اسمي نادية تونس وأنا فلسطينية من يافا ولدت، وأمي إيرلندية من Coot Hill Cavan. I don't know Irish. I did not grow up in a family that spoke it, but one day hopefully I'll learn to introduce myself in Irish. I just said my name is Nadya Tannous. I'm Palestinian. My father is from the villages of Jaffa and Lid. He was raised in Schnelled Camp in the desert outside of Marka in Jordan, in an orphanage, and my mother is from Coot Hill Cavan. And they met in San Francisco in 1982, had a bunch of children, and here we are. I started to organize with the Palestinian Youth Movement when I was 21 years old. And this many years later, 11 years later, I'm here and part of an organization which is 100% grassroots, transnational, from the United States, Canada, Britain, and Italy. And we are an organization of the post-Oslo generation. We are the generation that has continued to pick up our liberation struggle, knowing that if we do not hold it, it does not exist. We are an organization that aims to bring Palestinian and Arab youth together in order to confront Zionism and fight for the self-determination of the Palestinian people wherever we are. We're the largest Palestinian organization in the far diaspora, and we are a youth organization because we know that young people in every struggle, Ireland or Palestine, have led the struggle forward and have been pivotal. We've seen that also in this moment. I'm joined by some of my comrades from PYM Britain, and so I hope that you'll get to hear also from Yasmin. So I just want to start and say that it really is an honor to be here and to be hosted by the Bloody Sunday Trust, to be hosted by the community of Derry, and to speak before also the families of the martyrs of Bloody Sunday. I know that each of us here have a really poignant story of both personal sacrifice, but also looking injustice in the eye and the times that we've lived and trying to fight for a better and a different future. And just like Derry at one point changed the world, I believe that today Palestine is at the center of the world because Palestine has changed the world as we know it. In that way, we have 11,500 children's names of those who have been martyred in Gaza. We know that since the spring of 2024, the Gaza Health Ministry reported that they were unable to document the dead or the missing because their staff had been so largely targeted, mostly assassinated, and their infrastructure was demolished, which is why they were only able to add 2,000 people from December until May of 2024. According to the Lancet report, we are looking, first there was a report of 186,000 that many of you may have read. We're now up to 240,000, and that's the dead. So we're also speaking about the missing, over 300,000 Palestinian people. And of course, this is part of the responsibility of the international community, of all of us in solidarity with Palestine, is to actually push and say, what is the number, who are these people, and where are they? I want to also name the missing. We know that against the Geneva Convention, Article 4, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are either missing or have been removed and transferred from Gaza to the 48 territories under Israeli control. We don't know the number, but I can say that there are many people who are missing their family members, many children who have been kidnapped and who are being raised by families who are not theirs. This is part and constitutive of ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. We also have the number previous, I believe this was developed in January, that now 1 in 10 children in Gaza are permanently disabled. We know also from reports covered by Amnesty International in 2017 that one of the methods of collective punishment that the Israeli military administers to the Palestinian people is by not only maiming to kill, but aiming to maim, particularly shooting at a nerve in your knee that disconnects your nerve ending from the bottom of your foot upwards. And that particularly is targeting young men who are the primary breadwinners of the family in order to impoverish that family, make it impossible for them to actually gain decent work and therefore impact food security, etc. These are all things that we know, right, from the context here as well, right, what it does to actually punish a community and further impoverish them because they have decided to rise up and to demand their dignity. I start here because these are very stark times, but they are also historic. Today, the Palestinian people are victorious because they have been able to secure a ceasefire. We are here, right, 15 months, and I'm sure for many of you a lifetime, of organizing on behalf of the Palestinian people and in solidarity with our struggle. And it's hard to claim a victory when we know that the facts on the ground is that the Israelis are actually breaking ceasefire every day. So why am I adamant that this is a victory for the Palestinian people? It's because the Israeli plan from the beginning for Gaza, the facts on the ground, was to split us in half. It was to exterminate the people, to forcibly remove us. It was to create settlements. And instead, they built a brand new highway that many of you saw, right, which was to be the first freeway in an Israeli Gaza. These are aspirations that, as of today, have never happened. Instead, the Palestinian people were able to obtain total control of the highly populated areas of the land, removal of the Israeli military from the Nitzarim and the Philadelphia corridor, 3,000 of our people released in the hostage prisoner exchange for 33 Israeli hostages, including those from a gamut of background, particularly our prisoners with life sentences, prisoners under administrative detention, which is a British policy that was inherited in Palestine, meaning you're incarcerated without trial, and also women and children. For women and children, they are being returned to their villages. The last I checked, there were 3 women who have still not been released. All of them are from Gaza. For the others who were released, particularly the life sentence prisoners, they will be exiled. They will be exiled either to Qatar, to Jordan, to Egypt, or in some cases to Gaza. We know from our own history here that every single person is a universe, right? Every single person has a story. Every single one of these people have a story. And so when we see people like Zakaria Zubeidi released from prison, when there was no other option, no other recourse for his freedom, when we see somebody like Khalida Jarrah, who has taught for decades of all these years of her incarceration, she's taught generations of women behind bars about their rights as political prisoners. She's taught them to read in order to be able to pass their tawjihi. She was kept in a solitary unit where they covered up the only window in her cell. She was there for 7 months, and the only bit of air that she was able to gather was from the slit under the door. In her quote that she wrote to her husband, she said, "I died every day in that cell." And when she was released, she said it was the hardest internment I'd ever experienced. And this is a woman who the last time she was in prison, her daughter died. Saha, who's my age, died when she was in prison, and she was not able to actually go to her funeral. She said, this is the hardest, it's the worst conditions. And every one of them who were released, you see the joy of the community welcoming them. You see them being able to have physical touch, to see their families. And each of them have said, my freedom is so important, but it's not more important than what Gaza has been able to obtain in this moment. And that's the Palestinian spirit that the Israelis have been unable to break. It's the claim, of course, that there is a psychological victory, and materially, this is a victory for the Palestinian people. There's also a victory for our movement. The victory for our movements are manifold. Think about the last 15 months. Palestine is now a mass issue. Everybody knows about Palestine. We've had mobilizations of some of the largest numbers. In the United States, PYM was one of the core organizations that helped to organize the March on Washington. I stood in front of almost 1 million people in that square. And we demanded ceasefire, which the American government didn't give us. It's the Palestinian people who acquired that. It's the Palestinian leadership who acquired that. When we think of demands that were on the fringe previously, think about arms embargo. This is now a central demand of our movement. And we're applying that not just to Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and these companies who will sell weapons to literally anybody who goes to war. We're also applying this to the logistics companies like Maersk, which is one of the largest logistics companies in the world. They're Danish. The Palestinian Youth Movement, along with Progressive International, November 5th, released a report highlighting that Maersk had been shipping the Oshkosh tactical vehicles and the Namer lightly armored tanks 1 week shipments. So every week it would go from the port of New Jersey or the port of Houston to Algeciras, Spain in the south, and then would go from there to Israel. We were able to track that these Oshkosh and Namer vehicles were used in war crimes, such as the massacre of Jabalia, which many of you saw, right, in the north, where young men, children, elderly men were all rounded up, blindfolded, and transferred out of the territory. Many of them, from their own accounts, were tortured. Some of them did not return. Many of them ended up in mass graves. Those are the vehicles that Maersk shipped. We said this is extremely important because the logistics companies are the veins. They are the veins of imperialism. And we know this well. Without logistics, Britain would not have been able to have its power to take over Kashmir, right? British colonialism was facilitated by logistics companies. What about the French in Algeria? Logistics have always been a central part of the war machine. And so when we say, look, we've been demanding an arms embargo for the past 15 months, and if you, our governments, will not offer us this, then we, the people, will enforce it. Because trucks, trains, boats, planes, all use our infrastructure. And so it is our duty, it is our responsibility to not just say in this moment that this genocide happened and it shouldn't have. This genocide happened and we need to make sure that it never happens again. Not to us, not to anybody. Israel at this moment is restocking its weapons. It has learned from the past 15 months of war, and it is preparing for the next confrontation with the Palestinian people. What can we do as people of consciousness around the world? How can we build from the moment and the movement that we have built over decades of work, and particularly the last 15 months? I want to go back also to young people, because I know here and also in the United States, Canada, and in Britain, all around the world, young people took to their university campuses and they participated in what we would call the student intifada. And that was extremely important because they were able to say, look, not only is the university a historically colonial space, which has been invested in these different bonds, right? They're making profits in order to turn it into so-called education on the backs of, fracking, oil, gas, nuclear power, and also weapons, right? They were also able to say, this university is ours. We need to take up the public space in order to further the discussion that those in power will not have. And it scared those in power because the youth are the next generation. What does it mean for Zionism to be the common sense politic and for an entire generation to fill the streets and their campuses and now the workforce with this point of view? It means that there is another opportunity for our movement to grow with the new generation leading us, with their energy and with their vision. We know in this moment that Gaza lives. It has survived. So what do we do now? Well, you all know that there's a big role to play. The first is to confront Zionism and also to run accountability for those who are responsible for crimes of Zionism and who are guilty in particular of participating in the genocide. So we've seen from the Hind Rajab Foundation, for example, that they are actually compiling the names of Israeli soldiers who are visiting European countries and Latin America, and they are stopping them while on holiday or visiting their families. In the case of the soldier who visited Brazil, there was a collaboration between the Israeli consulate and the Argentinian police in order to transfer him and smuggle him from Brazil to Argentina, because they did not want him to be held accountable for his crimes. Once he reached Argentina, human rights lawyers got together and they actually served him and said, "We want to talk with you." There was an Israeli general who recently arrived in Italy. He got a tap on his shoulder that said, "Hi, we'd like to talk to you about your participation in the genocide of Gaza." New Zealand and Australia this week both rolled out policies that when Israelis enter the country, they have to fill out a form that talks about their military service, where they were the last 15 months, and where they've served. This is all extremely important because it pursues those who have participated in the crimes of Zionism to say there is a recourse, and that only recourse is not just the ICC and the ICJ, it's actually personal. The second in confronting Zionism and accountability is making sure that Israel cannot re-enter the international scene and clean its image. It's to say, you have created one of the most deadly massacres. You have committed the highest crime that you can against a group of people. It's the crime of genocide. We will not let you go back from this. We will not allow you to rejoin the international community as if nothing has happened. You are a racist, colonial, pariah state, guilty of the crimes of genocide, colonialism, and apartheid, and we will hold you accountable to that. We will not allow you to culturally collaborate on programming that washes Zionism of its crimes by saying that Zionism is the same as Judaism when it is not. We will not allow economic collaboration. We will not allow collaboration between different academic institutions when we know the role that the universities in Israel have played in the genocide itself and historically. So it's about being able to confront them and to hold this line. The second is, of course, rebuilding. We know, like I said, Gaza has survived, and now we need to make sure that Gaza lives. This primarily looks like removing the rubble. Over 80% of the infrastructure, the buildings themselves, have been destroyed. The sewage infrastructure, food, water, health have all been completely dismantled. We saw the images of people returning home to the north saying that they would live in tents on top of the rubble because that is their home and they will stay there until the conditions change. But there is factually on the ground still famine. People are still starving. Children are still not receiving their most basic medical needs. We need to be able to do something about this. For much of this, we will have to wait for phase 3 of the ceasefire deal. So we're now in phase 1. There's 42 days for phase 1. Phase 2, the negotiations will actually start quite soon. Phase 2 will then begin. By about June, we're looking at phase 3. The Palestinian proposal is to have an independent body that will facilitate the rebuilding of Gaza. In the meantime, I think that all of us who are part of solidarity formations need to start thinking about what skills we have to offer or who we know that can offer them. We need states to be involved who are willing to take a progressive stance. We need delegations of witnesses who are able to testify on what is happening in Gaza today. And we need delegations of engineers. We need doctors. We need the connections between different universities and student organizations to be able to build with the people. One of the central demands as well, and you all know this from the Palestinian struggle, is dignity. Living in dignity means that we are not just victims of history, but we are now full people. We are writers, we are educators, we are doctors, we are people who are able to contribute to society. And so I encourage you all to actually think of what opportunities can you make to build with the people in Gaza as they also wait to be able to rebuild their society. And this is also the role of the diaspora. So we have a lot of conversation in PYM about what our role is. Part of this is also to rebuild. We were able, through a grassroots campaign, to raise over $1.4 million that was specifically going to aid, which we know was trickling into Gaza. But every time we would get reports that we were able to deliver, through these donations, the Middle East Children's Alliance were able to deliver eggs, right, to children, which is some of the best protein for them, water, shoes. We knew that we were supporting the samud, or the steadfastness of our people. The last demand, the last bit of work, is arms embargo, like I've said, and I started there. It's to really make the point that we will not allow Israel to continue, as it always has, with impunity. This genocide, we know, would not have been possible without the diplomatic cover, the economic support, the political cover, and the media cover of countries like the United States, Britain, Germany. We have to be able to say no more means that we will lobby our governments, particularly progressive contexts such as Ireland, such as Spain, such as Brussels, to make a material impact here. It also means that we will not allow nor contribute to the economic cover, the media cover, or the political cover of the Israeli state. I know, well, I haven't even looked at my notes, but how am I doing on time?
We're here to help you.
Okay. I would say that I know that you are a community that understands very well that you need to meet history and be active agents in it. This is absolutely incredible that you're able to hold an inquest on the crimes of the British state in order to demand that there be real truth about your family members and the start to a long line of work on what it means to actually fight for a dignified Ireland, a place where everybody has equality, a place where there is economic prosperity, and a place where there is a united island. I would say that earlier in the story about the Black and Tans, that's actually a personal story for me. I'm sure it is for many of you, but my grandpa, John, who was born in Cavan in Coot Hill, we grew up with a story about him because the boys in the town used to dig trenches. So the British patrol cars would fall in. And the Black and Tans would come throughout the town and they would pull all the boys from their beds and they would make them fill the gaps back in on the road. And it was very commonly said that some of those boys did not come back because they ended up dead in the trench. My family on my father's side is from Jaffa in Lid. The Black and Tans came from Ireland, and when they went to Palestine, they specifically went to the town of Jaffa. And they participated in a modernization campaign, which my grandparents on my Palestinian side were alive for. And they remember this. They actually were the armed guards while the British destroyed our houses. That's what modernization means. So they destroyed our houses so that they could remake and start to build what now is the city of Tel Aviv. It was the black and tans who had come from Ireland who were their guards. And they were very brutal. So it's interesting because not only are the two sides of my family coming from very similar sort of political experiences, but they're actually not that far, and that's because of that legacy of colonialism that we've inherited. The other thing that we've inherited is a robust history of international solidarity. We know that the things that come from dairy matter. We know that what comes from the struggles in South Africa, in Kenya, in Palestine, these are all things that rhyme. In Vietnam, but they've changed the world. And even when you're looking at the eye of defeat, there actually is another miracle waiting. And that miracle is the steadfastness of the people, the ability to say, we will not give up. And it's not enough to have our human rights. We don't just want water and food. We don't just want freedom of movement. We want our political rights. We want the ability to be free. We want every prisoner to return home. We want all of the refugees to come back. And we want the self-determination and the liberation of our land. That is the type of demand that we have inherited. These are our political rights that none of us can barter or sell. They are inherited. They are our collective rights. That is the lineage that we come from as people. And as people who are fighting for your rights 800 years later, I want to say that I'm very, very proud to be Irish. And I'm extremely proud to be Palestinian. I hope that in this moment, we will honor the victory of this ceasefire, and instead of walking away from the struggle, we will double down to say, there is so much work to be done. And so I hope to see you in the work ahead. I know that we are brave, I know that we are visionary, and I know, most of all, that we are committed to the principle of freedom. Thank you so much for having me.